Ever had to stand up to someone everyone else feared?
Imagine sitting at your family's dinner table after years of grinding through law school, finally ready to share the biggest news of your life, only to have your own parents shatter everything in an instant, kicking you out like yesterday's trash because your sister's dreams trump yours every time. Now picture walking away with a suitcase and a secret that could bring them to their knees a week later, but wondering if revenge tastes as sweet as it promises when your heart's still breaking. I had just driven 8 hours straight from that stuffy law school campus in Boston, my old sedan crammed with law books, notes from endless mock trials, and a flicker of hope that maybe this time they'd see me as more than the reliable older daughter who always footed the bill for family extras. The house in suburban Ohio looked the same as ever, that two-story colonial with the faded blue shutters and the driveway where Dad taught me to ride a bike, but as I pulled up, the knot in my stomach tightened because I knew announcing the pregnancy could flip the script on our fragile peace. I stepped inside to the smell of Mom's pot roast wafting from the kitchen, a Sunday ritual that promised normalcy, but the air already hummed with Dad's grumbling about work and Lisa's excited chatter about her latest promotion at the real estate office. Dad, Robert, held court at the head of the table, his broad shoulders filling the chair like he was still the high school football star, fork stabbing at his plate as he boasted about closing a big deal at the auto factory where he'd slaved for 25 years. Mom, Susan, hovered nearby, dishing out seconds with that forced smile, her graying hair pinned back neatly, always the peacemaker who'd smooth over Dad's temper since I could remember. And there was Lisa, my 28-year-old sister, perched across from me with her manicured nails and that designer blouse she probably charged to Dad's card, rattling on about her fancy new clients as if closing a house sale made her the family savior. I sat down, forcing a laugh at her jokes, my hand instinctively brushing my abdomen where the secret grew, a little life from a romance I hadn't planned but couldn't regret, not yet. The conversation flowed like it always did, Dad praising Lisa's hustle, Mom nodding along, me chiming in with polite nods about my bar exam prep, but inside, I rehearsed the words, picturing hugs and toasts to the next generation of Harpers. Then, as the apple pie steamed on the sideboard, I took a breath and said it, I'm pregnant. The clatter of forks stopped cold. Dad's face strained of color, then flushed crimson, his fist crashing down on the oak table so hard the water glasses rattled and pie filling oozed over the edge. Lisa matters, he roared, veins bulging in his neck, not you. You've thrown it all away with this mess. You're no longer part of this family. His words hit like a gavel, echoing the dismissals I'd heard my whole life, the way he'd fund Lisa's whims, but make me earn every scholarship dollar. Mom's glare followed, sharp as the carving knife she clutched, her voice ice. You made your choice, go sleep on the streets if that's your plan now. Lisa froze, eyes wide but silent, maybe shocked or just relieved the heat wasn't on her perfect path. The room spun with their fury, the favoritism I'd swallowed for years bubbling up like acid, how I deferred dreams to support them while Lisa skipped consequences. But in that chaos, I spotted my opening for a quick, sharp jab. As Dad ranted about my ruined future, I calmly mentioned overhearing Lisa's creative tweaks to her resume for that job, the little white lies about experience that got her the gig, dropping it casual like so it landed amid the shouting, making Dad pause and shoot her a questioning look for the first time ever. It wasn't much, but it cracked their illusion, Lisa squirming as Mom deflected. Heart pounding, I rose, grabbed my suitcase from the foyer where I'd stashed it optimistically, and pulled out the letter I'd written in the car, pages hinting at family secrets they'd buried deep, like Dad's old shortcuts at work that nearly cost us everything, tied subtly to why I ended up here without naming the father yet. I left it smack in the pie's ruins and walked out, the screen door slamming like a full stop. The night air chilled my skin as I tossed the bag in the trunk, sliding behind the wheel with tears blurring the taillights of their porch. Uncertainty clawed at me. What now for this baby, for me, with no safety net and a truth that could append them all? I gunned the engine, tires crunching gravel, the road vanishing into darkness, when my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. Emily, we need to talk about your father's past and the baby. That text from the unknown number glowed on my phone screen like a ghost in the dashboard light as I sped down the interstate, the Ohio countryside blurring into a black smear outside the window. My mind churning through the implications of someone knowing about Dad's past and linking it to the baby before I even had a chance to process the dinner disaster myself. I swerved into the next rest area, a dimly lit spot with semis idling like sleeping beasts, and stared at the message for what felt like hours, debating whether to reply or block it, but curiosity won out because in that moment of raw vulnerability, with tears streaking my face and the weight of rejection pressing down, any thread to understanding felt like a lifeline even if it dangled from a stranger's hand. I typed a cautious response asking who they were, but got nothing back, so I pocketed the phone and focused on the immediate chaos, checking into a roadside motel that charged by the hour and smelled faintly of bleach. And forgotten dreams, the kind of place where truckers nursed coffees and transient souls like mine pieced together next steps under flickering fluorescent bulbs. Unpacking my suitcase on the lumpy bed, I spread out a few essentials, a prenatal vitamin bottle, my law school transcripts, and a worn photo of the family from better days when we vacationed at Lake Erie, all smiles and sunburns before the cracks showed, and sat there reflecting on the pregnancy that had started as a surprise during my final semester, a fleeting romance with a visiting lecturer whose charm masked deeper connections I hadn't fully grasped until now. The baby kicked softly, a reminder of the life I'd chosen to keep despite the timing, and I allowed myself a wry chuckle at the irony of becoming a single mom right after earning a degree meant to secure independence, thinking how Mom would have lectured me on priorities if she weren't busy disowning me. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by flashbacks to childhood. Dynamics that explained so much of the favoritism, like the time in high school when I aced the state debate championship, but Dad skipped the awards to attend Lisa's soccer game, or how Mom sewed Lisa's prom dress from scratch while handing me a gift card for mine, always framing it as Lisa needing the boost because she was the sensitive one, leaving me to toughen up on my own through scholarships and summer jobs that paid for her extras. By dawn, resolve hardened, and I hit the road again, landing in a mid-sized town 2 hours away where a former classmate hooked me up with a sublet apartment above a quiet bookstore. The rent affordable on the temp paralegal job I snagged at a small firm handling family law cases, the kind where irony laced every filing as I advised women on custody battles while navigating my own unraveling home front. Days blurred into a routine of morning sickness battles, evening walks along the riverfront to clear my head, and late nights studying bar exam materials by lamplight, all while the growing belly forced me into looser clothes and a mindset shift toward protecting this child from the conditional love I'd endured. The uncertainty loomed large, especially as I pondered reaching out to the baby's father, whose world of influence could upend everything but also provide the stability I craved, yet holding back felt like my only power play in a game stacked against me. For a dash of clever revenge that lightened the load one afternoon, after overhearing through social media that my family planned a block party to rally support and pretend all was well, I sent an anonymous email to the Neighborhood Association tip line, detailing concerns about Dad's past factory shortcuts that mirrored a recent local scandal, nothing provable, but enough to spark questions from busybody neighbors, turning their gathering into a whisper fest where Dad fielded awkward probes over burgers and beans, his forced laughs hiding the sweat as Lisa played damage control. It gave me a quiet thrill, imagining their discomfort mirroring mine from the dinner table, a small balancing of scales without direct confrontation. As the week wore on, subtle clues about the father's identity nagged at me, like a half-remembered conversation from Dad's old stories about a business rival turned ally, building that slow burn of anticipation for when the truth would force hands. Then, on a rainy Thursday evening as I curled up with tea in my new space, my phone rang with Mom's number, her voice trembling through the static as she begged to know if I was safe. The conversation laced with unintended slips about how the letter had unearthed Dad's regrets over a man named Alexander from his early career days, a name that hit me like a thunderclap because it matched the one I'd guarded so closely, leaving me frozen with the receiver in hand as she pleaded for a second chance without realizing she'd just handed me the key to their undoing. Mom's voice trailed off into sobs on the phone line, her unintended mention of Alexander hanging between us like a live wire, sparking memories I'd buried under layers of denial and determination as I gripped the receiver in my dimly lit apartment, the rain pattering against the window like it was trying to wash away the complications piling up faster than I could sort them. I murmured something non-committal about needing time, hanging up before she could press further, then sank onto the couch with a sigh that carried the weight of moral crossroads. Because naming the father out loud to her would either shatter the fragile power I held or invite a flood of judgments I wasn't ready for, especially when my choices, keeping the pregnancy secret for months to focus on finals, not looping in Alexander sooner because his high-profile life seemed worlds away, now felt like gambles that painted me as the reckless one even to myself. The practical hardships hit harder in the following days, my temp job at the legal aid clinic stretching thin as I juggled client consultations on child support claims with my own prenatal checkups, the doctor's office a sterile reminder of solo parenting ahead, where the ultrasound tech's sympathetic smiles only amplified the isolation from the family who'd once been my everything. Bills stacked up on the kitchen counter, utilities threatening cutoff because the sublet didn't come with grace periods, forcing me to pawn a necklace Dad gave me for my graduation, a bitter twist since it was the one heirloom he claimed symbolized our bond, now traded for rent money that kept a roof over the baby's head. I laughed dryly at the absurdity one evening, stirring instant noodles in a pot that bubbled like my simmering resentment, thinking how Lisa probably dined on steak while I scraped by, her life untouched by the real-world grind I'd shouldered for all of us. To cope, I delved into old boxes from my move, pulling out emails printed from law school. Days that hinted at Alexander's orbit, professional notes from his consulting firm overlapping with Dad's factory contacts, subtle threads like a shared conference in Cleveland where Dad's envy had soured into silence, clues that built a narrative of family hypocrisy I couldn't ignore. Dilemmas deepened when I toyed with dialing Alexander, his number still saved from our last stolen weekend, but hesitation gripped me because revealing the pregnancy might drag him into the mess or worse, make him see me as a complication rather than the equal we'd been, choices that had me second-guessing if protecting my independence was worth the loneliness, even as the audience in my head might call it foolish pride delaying the support I deserved. Work offered small anchors, like mentoring a client through a messy divorce where the husband favored his mistress's kids over his own, mirroring our dinner table favoritism in ways that fueled my quiet fury, but it also highlighted my vulnerabilities. Like when a colleague asked about my family support and I dodged with a joke about being a lone wolf lawyer, the humor masking the ache. For that episode's witty revenge, which unfolded during a slow afternoon at the clinic, I leveraged my access to public records databases to submit a formal inquiry on Dad's behalf, framed innocently as a favor for a hypothetical client, but zeroing in on his factory's old compliance issues from the Alexander partnership era, the request routing through official channels to trigger an audit notice that landed on his desk unexpectedly, embarrassing him in a staff meeting where whispers about skeletal chickens coming home forced him to defend his record to the boss he'd just bragged to, a clever indirect hit that left me smirking over my coffee without ever showing my hand. The growing conflict simmered as I navigated these tensions, uncertainty about the baby's future mingling with the thrill of holding secrets that could rewrite alliances, subtle hints. From a faded business card in Dad's old wallet photo, Alexander's signature scrawled across it, teasing the full revelation I guarded like a loaded gun. Weeks ticked by in this precarious balance, my body rounding out and energy dipping, until one crisp autumn morning a certified letter arrived from home, the envelope thick with desperation, containing not just another plea but a partial bombshell. They'd hired a private investigator after piecing together clues from my letter and Mom's slip, uncovering that Alexander was indeed the father through mutual contacts, the note ending with Dad's shaky handwriting begging me to return before the whole town connected the dots and their reputations crumbled. The certified letter crumpled in my fist as I stood in the narrow hallway of my apartment, the words from Dad's shaky script blurring under a fresh wave of anger and vindication because they'd gone so far as to hire a private investigator, digging into my life like I was some criminal instead of their daughter, all to confirm what my hints had teased and now threatened to expose their own tangled history with Alexander in the harsh light of small-town gossip. I tossed it onto the coffee table amid scattered prenatal pamphlets and legal briefs, pacing the worn carpet as the reality sank in that their discovery wasn't just about the baby, but a mirror to Dad's buried resentments. Those old debts from the failed partnership where Alexander had loaned him startup cash for a side venture only for Dad to mismanage it into bankruptcy. A secret he'd hidden by blaming market crashes while quietly resenting the man who'd bailed him out twice more over the years. Calls flooded in after that, Moms. Voicemails a mix of tearful apologies and probing questions about Alexander's intentions, Lisa's texts shifting from concern to outright envy as she hinted at how my drama was overshadowing her engagement rumors. Her jealousy bubbling up in passive-aggressive lines, like wondering if I planned to crash the family image with a high-society baby daddy. I ignored most, focusing instead on my swelling routine at the clinic where cases of estranged relatives hit too close, like a woman fighting her in-laws over inheritance that echoed my own leverage dilemmas. Choices that had me up at night debating whether to loop Alexander in fully or use the knowledge as a shield, a decision that felt increasingly selfish as the baby's kicks grew stronger. Demanding a stable world I couldn't guarantee without risking exploitation from all sides. Humor crept in during quieter moments, like chuckling over a vending machine sandwich that tasted like cardboard victory, thinking how Dad's investigator probably billed more than my monthly rent, a wasteful irony that lightened the load just enough to keep pushing forward with job interviews for full-time paralegal spots and evening classes to polish my bar prep, all while my body ached from the extra weight and the emotional toll of isolation. Twists emerged as I sifted through more old family emails I'd digitized, uncovering Lisa's role in the hidden debt, how she'd once forged Dad's signature on a loan extension to cover her shopping sprees during college, a cover-up Mom had enabled to keep the peace. Revelations that painted her as less the innocent favorite and more a complicit player in our dysfunctional web, fueling my resolve to demand real change before any reconciliation. The impending revenge sharpened my edge, conflict escalating with each ignored plea that bordered on harassment, like Dad's late-night call where he admitted the favoritism stemmed from guilt over failing me like he failed with Alexander, his voice cracking in a way that tugged at old loyalties but couldn't erase the dinner-table betrayal. For that episode's satisfying, low-key payback which I executed on a whim one overcast Saturday, I created a burner social media profile posing as a concerned local citizen, posting a thoughtful thread in community forums about lessons from family business blunders that wove in anonymized details of mismanaged loans and envious partnerships straight from Dad's past, hashtagged just right to trend among Ohio manufacturing groups where his colleagues lurked, the comments exploding with speculation that reached his Facebook feed by evening, forcing him to issue a defensive statement at work about misunderstandings from decades ago, while Lisa scrambled to downplay it to her friends. Their discomfort a witty echo of my street sleep threat without me ever naming names. Uncertainty wrapped tighter as these ripples spread, subtle clues like a forwarded article on Alexander's philanthropy tied to factory revitalization programs hinting at paths to forgiveness or further fallout, leaving me torn between the power of my silence and the loneliness it bred. Then, as autumn leaves swirled outside my window during a particularly draining doctor's visit confirming all was well with the pregnancy, a sleek courier envelope arrived, not from family, but bearing Alexander's law firm seal. Inside, an invitation to a private dinner at an upscale restaurant midway between our towns, worded with careful neutrality about discussing our shared future and including a subtle nod to resolving family debts on neutral terms. The postscript from Dad pleading for my presence to make this right before it's too late, hanging the question of whether I'd walk into their trap or dictate the rules on a knife's edge. The courier envelope from Alexander's firm lay open on my kitchen table, its crisp paper a stark contrast to the cluttered chaos of my life these past months. The invitation to that private dinner pulling at me like a current I couldn't ignore because it promised not just closure, but a chance to redefine the power dynamics that had defined my family since Dad's fist hit the table. All while the baby's insistent movements reminded me that any decision now rippled into a future I was still building brick by stubborn brick. I spent the next day mulling it over during a rare free afternoon at the clinic, flipping through case files on reconciliation trusts and parental rights that mirrored my bind, the moral weight heavy as I weighed showing up on my terms, demanding apologies etched in ink, not just words, or walking away forever. A choice that felt both empowering and heartbreakingly isolating, especially when whispers in my head called it vengeful stubbornness, delaying the support a child deserved from all angles. Humor edged in as I imagined the scene, Dad fidgeting in a booth like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar, Mom dabbing at her eyes with a linen napkin instead of her usual tissue box, and Lisa scrolling her phone to avoid the awkwardness. A light-hearted fantasy that eased the knot in my chest just enough to book the reservation and pack a small overnight bag, steeling myself for the drive back toward Ohio with the radio tuned low to avoid the ache of old family playlists. Twists hit en route when Alexander called ahead, his voice steady over the speaker as he outlined a proposal for co-parenting logistics tied to settling Dad's lingering debts from their partnership days, revealing he'd quietly paid off the last installment years ago without credit, a bombshell that flipped my resentment toward Dad into pity for the man who'd let pride poison every bond, including mine. The restaurant loomed upscale yet unpretentious, a converted mill on the river, with candlelit tables and the murmur of affluent diners who reminded me of the life Alexander navigated, and as I waddled in, Belly leading the way, my family was already there, Dad rising awkwardly to pull out a chair, his face etched with lines deeper than before, Mom twisting a napkin in her lap, and Lisa offering a tentative hug that I accepted briefly, the air thick with unspoken accusations and the scent of seared steak that turned my stomach. They launched into apologies almost immediately, Dad clearing his throat to admit the favoritism was his failure projected outward, born from the sabotage of the Alexander deal where jealousy led him to badmouth the partnership to investors, costing them both and leaving him to raise us on scraps while resenting any success that echoed his losses, including my law degree that shone too brightly next to Lisa's safer path. Mom chimed in with regrets over enabling it, confessing how she'd shielded Lisa from the fallout by spoiling her a cycle that made my pregnancy the perfect scapegoat for their unresolved guilt, her voice breaking as she reached for my hand and whispered about the grandchild they'd missed ultrasounds for, words that tugged at the forgiveness I'd armored against. Lisa, surprisingly, owned her part too, admitting the jealousy that fueled her silence at dinner stemmed from knowing about the forged loan and fearing I'd expose it, a twist that humanized her pettiness but didn't erase the sting of her complicity in my exile. Emotions swirled in that confined space, my own tears threatening as I laid out the full truth, not just the romance with Alexander during his Boston visits, sparked by shared late nights debating ethics in a way that felt genuine amid my grind, but how their rejection had forged my independence, choices like withholding the father's name that now seemed less selfish and more survival in hindsight, though part of me wondered if the audience watching this unfold would judge me for dragging it out when reconciliation dangled so close. Alexander arrived midway, sliding into the seat beside me with a nod to the table, his presence commanding yet kind as he corroborated the history, explaining how the baby's existence bridged their old rift without erasing it, a subtle clue to his own hesitations about stepping into family drama he'd wisely avoided before. For the ultimate revenge that crystallized in that moment, clever and cutting without cruelty, I slid across the folder I'd prepared with clinic resources, a binding agreement for a family trust funding the baby's needs from Alexander's contributions, but conditioned on Dad signing a formal acknowledgement of past wrongs, including a public donation in Alexander's name to a local legal aid fund for single parents, essentially forcing him to atone publicly for the envy that started it all, his. hand trembling as he read the terms and realized I'd turned their hypocrisy into a legacy of quiet justice, Lisa's eyes widening at the implication for her own clean slate. They begged then, all of them, voices overlapping in a chorus of pleas for forgiveness and inclusion, promising therapy sessions and equal shares in the grandchild's life, Dad's eyes meeting mine with a vulnerability I'd never seen. Mom vowing to dismantle the favoritism brick by brick. I nodded, accepting the paper's signatures with a measured smile, but as we parted into the cooling night, Alexander walking me to my car with talks of weekend visits and Dad calling after me with one last, "I'm sorry," uncertainty lingered like river mist. The baby's future secured yet shadowed by questions of whether their change was skin-deep or soul-shifting, if revenge had healed the fractures or just papered them over, leaving me driving away with a full heart and heavier doubts about family ties that bend but rarely break clean, pondering in the silence if true forgiveness blooms from ashes or if some burns scar forever, unanswered as the taillights faded into the dark.